This is Real Life with Deb Waterbury, a real show for real people with real issues. And now, here's your host, Dr. Deb Waterbury.
Welcome to our next episode of Real Life with Deb Waterbury. Hey, Bobbie.
Hey, Deb. Good to be here.
We're back into our grief series. We've been doing it for about the last 2 weeks. We got 2 weeks left. And as I've said the last couple of weeks, we've had Bobbie and Bob on as well a couple of times on our show. Bobbie's been on my radio show. And plus, when I was the women's minister at Faith, I think you spoke at one of my functions.
Yes.
That was a long time ago. That was like a long time ago. I was trying to think a minute ago about how long ago. Was it like 20 years?
Well, I'm not going to go there,
Okay,
Deb. That makes it sound really old.
But anyway, the point is, Bobbie and I have known each other a long time, and she, I'm telling you, what she does right now, and with the grief and wellness group, is so almost miraculous and life-changing that I've always wanted to have her back on whatever show I'm doing. And so we decided that it would be best if we did a 4-week series. If you have not caught the last 2 weeks, I encourage you to go back on YouTube at debwaterbury.com, wherever you're watching right now. If you're watching on Facebook, Instagram, wherever you're watching, go back to my YouTube channel and catch the first 2. And then there'll be the fourth one will be next week. It is a series that Bobbie has put together where she and her husband, Bob, has spoken to us on alternating weeks about grief and about what the symptoms of grief are, what grief actually is. This week, we're going to talk about where to get help or how to get help for when you feel like you're experiencing grief. I think, Bobbie, it is the most important thing, in my opinion, is recognizing that most people really don't understand that they are grieving.
I think that's so true, Deb. We make any kind of excuse for the way we're feeling, not up to things or not enjoying things.
Right.
Like Bob had mentioned last time. And so people need to, first of all, be able to identify what's going on in their bodies, what's going on in their minds.
Yes.
And is that the way they want to be?
Yes. And that was our show last week with Bob, and he was so good at making sure we understood that there were certain symptoms of this. But those symptoms, as we talked about, look a lot like depression. And so how do you, talking about understanding the difference between the two, and that depression often doesn't have a cause, but grief always will. There is an event, something has happened to bring on those symptoms and to change your behavior or the way, your quality of life even.
Yes. And sometimes they may not even remember all of the things that have happened to them in their childhood or along their path.
Right.
They've kind of forgotten or don't even want to, recall those things. And so it is possible. Many people are walking around, and I describe it as walking around with a broken heart because they've been hurt and disappointed and they're feeling really down. And when you talk about depression, it is true that unresolved grief can go into a clinical
I
depression.
thought about that. When Bob and I were talking about it last week, I thought about that depression might really be a result of not addressing grief.
Yes. And it can go into a clinical depression, which is why we want to encourage people to really seek help when you begin to notice some of those symptoms that you relate to, because there is help.
There is. And it's crazy to not, because there's so much hope in realizing this is not how you have to be.
No.
It's not even how God would want you to be.
Right.
This is not his best plan for you. And so, but often I think people get this idea, well, this is just my cross to bear. This is just how it is. This is how I'm going to be until I die. And that is just not biblical.
And it's so sad because maybe even they've tried some things.
Yes.
And they've tried the advice that they've received from family or friends or doctors, or they've even gone to some support groups.
Yes.
And they find that they're just reliving the event over and over again. They don't want to do that.
Yes.
And they don't experience the change or transformation or the freedom that really comes from grief recovery.
Yes. And that is there's just so much hope in that. It doesn't have to stay this way. So this week we're talking about getting help. We've talked about what grief is. We've talked about the symptoms of grief last week. And this week we want to talk about actually getting help. Yes. So Bobbie, because she is a woman after my own heart, is very organized. And so Bobbie has actually given me where she's going to give us the when, the why, the where, and the how on getting help with grief or experiencing grief. So first off, the when. Was it appropriate to ask for help.
Yes, and I really thought about that because people, like Bob had mentioned last week, delay in getting help. They think with time, it's going to get better and better and better.
That's true.
Because that's what they've been told, and that's what they've heard.
And what
so
is and society tells you that, be strong.
Yes.
You're going to be strong enough, and especially, for men and women, but women in particular, society loves a strong woman, and a strong woman doesn't cry, a strong man doesn't cry. They take their stuff and they just, buck up buttercup and then move on. And that's just that's inappropriate.
I call it Academy Award performance. They act like they are fine.
Yes.
But that's not true of what's going on inside. In fact, our acronym in the grief recovery method that we use for FINE is feelings inside, not expressed.
Oh, I like that.
So feelings inside, not expressed.
I'm going to say that to my husband the next time I go home and ask him how he is. He says, fine. I'm going to say, feelings inside, not expressed. He's going to say, you've been talking to Bobbie again, haven't you?
and truly, there are some times that we do feel fine, and we want to go with that. But a lot of the time, fine is a pat answer. And that's what we use to mask the grief, the hurt, the disappointment, and as you mentioned, try to be strong.
Yes.
So when is it appropriate to get help? Well, there's a couple of things that I'm going to share with you. One is when you are totally at wit's end.
Yes.
You have just had it, and you know that you need help. You may not want it.
Right.
Because we don't oftentimes want to admit that we can't handle it on our own.
Right.
But I'm telling you, grief is the normal and natural reaction to a loss of any kind.
Yes.
And we need help in order to walk through that process.
Very good.
To get through it. So what's ends? When we are just at the end and we don't know what to do, we do know that this is not the way I want to go on living.
Yes. And who would want that? I mean, who would want to go on? I mean, honestly, I know it can become almost habitual.
Yes.
This is just the way things are.
And we've tried to put that mask on, that everything's fine for so long, in order to maybe even please those around us and our friends, because they can't understand why, the divorce happened 6 years ago and I'm still grieving.
Yes, exactly.
Or the death of a child. It's been 20 years and I still feel that void.
That is so sad. Okay, so why then is it important that we seek, not, it's good to go to your pastors and whatever, but why is it important to seek professional help, Bobbie?
Yes, and this is important too, because in the midst of your grief and wit's end, oftentimes there is a glimmer of hope, and that you do have that energy. I do need to seek help.
Yes.
And I do want a professional.
Yes,
and one of the things that I want to emphasize, the reason for that is just kind of what you and I were talking about, Deb. There is so much misinformation out there.
Yes, there really is.
You cannot rely on or trust the advice from family and friends, as well-meaning as they are.
Right.
You cannot trust that that's going to help result in a positive change.
Well, it's like going to the doctor. If you think you've got, pneumonia, you're not going to go to your mama and say, Mama, what do you reckon I ought to do? You know, and go to the doctor who actually has some training and can tell you what you ought to do. It really, it makes good sense that you'd want to find a professional who actually has a solution.
Yes.
That will work.
Yes. Now let me tell you about the professionals out there.
Yes.
I being one of them.
Yes.
That we as professionals in the medical field and in the mental health field for sure, where we deal with depression and anxiety and all of these, we have all been taught Dr. Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. And we have tried to make those work. And unfortunately, many of the professionals out there today are still trying to make those 5 stages work.
They are. By and large, most of them still are. Unfortunately, that's what I hear.
Now, and when you're going out to find a professional counselor that maybe has that billing, that they are a grief recovery counselor, please know that you're going to find someone who's probably very caring and very kind and loving, that you'll feel very comfortable with. But ask them what process they use.
Yes, absolutely. It's so important.
I will tell you, in my 30 years of counseling, that I have searched and done research to find something much more effective than the 5 stages. And I am here to tell you that the grief recovery method, which we use, has been transforming and given that hope and help so that people know that they truly can move on with their life.
Even in the name of it, the 5 stages of grief, well, you're just naming them. There they are. Even if they were there, that was them. And even if it was viable and logical, you're naming it. The grief recovery process is a process for recovery, which just, in my opinion, even in the name of it, not even to mention the sustenance and the substance of what it is, suggests something more hopeful, as opposed to here's naming what you're going through. You feel good because this is what you're supposed to be going through. Well, nobody feels good. Doesn't matter if you're supposed to go through it or not. Somebody helped me process through this. So yeah, the recovery process, it seems even more hopeful in the name. So let me move on really quick. How does a person know where they should go then? I mean, having said that, how do you know where to go?
Well, that's why we're here.
Right.
So the grief recovery method that we use has been absolutely transforming, and that's what we use in our individual sessions with people that are seeking help, as well as we provide groups for people. But the thing I love about the grief recovery method, and I've told you I searched a long time, is that it is evidence-based. And you want to ask, is this an evidence-based program?
Yes.
And it is Kent State University that did the research on the grief recovery method and found that it does. It helps change. It gives us certainly new knowledge, but also helps us to change our attitudes that results in changing our behaviors.
Now, you didn't say you would do this, and I may be putting you on the spot here, but just popped in my head. If someone needed to, I mean, like they were looking for a grief specialist or someone to help them, could you, if they got in touch with you, just as they were trying to vet out, could you give them questions they should ask? Like if somebody, this is what you need to ask a person to see whether or not, because as you're speaking, I'm thinking, if I was go into an office, I would probably lose, my brain would go blank and I'd forget everything. But if I had a list, these are the questions I need to ask to see if this is, to guide me toward the right one. Could they get those from you?
Yes, absolutely. I'd be glad to.
All right.
In fact, you want to find out, do they use the 5 stages?
Yes.
If they do, be very polite and look elsewhere.
Just that easy, that simple. But you don't, who would know? If you don't know, you don't know.
That's right.
You don't know what you don't know.
Because Dr. Kubler-Ross, her research was on death and dying, and that's not where you are.
Right.
You're among the living, and you want to move on with your life.
Right.
So let's go something beyond that. The grief recovery method that we use, and certainly I welcome any kind of calls, and we are here to provide help for you. But I also want you to know that I'm not saying it's the only program out there that works.
Of course not. But it is one that that does work.
It is.
Yes.
And it's the only one I know that transforms lives and that has given people
across
the hope
the board too.
And the help.
And that's what I love. It's across the board. It doesn't matter what you're grieving.
Yes.
This process helps across the board with all grief.
That's right.
And that's what I love about that. Okay, so last question, because we got the when, the why, the where, and the how. How does the person get a hold of you so they can set up an appointment and move forward with it?
Absolutely. We have individual and group sessions available for you. And our website is griefthethief.com, which I know you love, Deb.
I love that. It's all one word, griefthethief.com.
And that's because unresolved grief will definitely rob you.
Yes.
But our telephone number is 520-668-5906. That's 668-5906.
Very good. And that information on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, is underneath this episode. So you'll be able to get all of that. If you're watching on Facebook, go to Deb Waterbury at the YouTube channel. You'll be able to get all that underneath. We'd also love to have any of your comments. If you have questions for Bobbie, we monitor this all the time. We can get those to Bobbie. She'll get back to you. I can tell you from personal experience, I've referred many people to Bobbie and all of them have processed through their grief. It's not a, maybe it'll work for you, and if this doesn't, whatever. This works. And it works because it makes sense. Because this is a process that literally makes sense. And when you get in it, you'll be like, yeah, this makes so much sense.
It does. And part of the reason why it does is because we tell you what doesn't work.
Right.
All of those things you've learned,
yes,
from the well-meaning people in your life, haven't been as successful as you wanted it to be. And so the grief recovery method is a concrete step-by-step action steps that you take to really regain control of your life.
Very good. And you know what, and I want to just reemphasize before I close what Bob and I talked about last week, and that is don't wait. If you are experiencing, and again, if you haven't seen this episode, you need to go back and watch last week's, the symptoms of grief, and Bob talks about all of them. If you're experiencing those, don't wait. I mean, he talked about people who are waiting, 5, 10, 20 years, and you're just immobilized by what the grief has done to you. Don't wait, because there is, nobody wants to live a life with no hope. And here we're offering, this is hope. And this is not just hope that doesn't deliver, it's hope that delivers. So make sure that you contact them, or if you have a loved one that you recognize these things in, contact them. Don't wait. God bless you guys. We got one more episode next week. This has been one of my favorite series just because I know it's so helpful and so many people come to me about these kinds of problems. And I feel so blessed to know that I have someone I can send them to where the answers are. So take this for the wealth of information that it is. And I'll be praying for y'all. See you next week.
Thank you for joining me today on this episode of Real Life with Deb Waterbury. I hope it's been a blessing to you as much as it was to me. If you want any of my books or information on articles or any of my speaking engagements, you can go to my website at debwaterbury.com. God bless you.